In this episode, we focus on a part of security operations that sounds like paperwork until you realize it is what keeps real incidents from falling apart: the handoff. In a security operations center, SOC, work rarely stays with one person from start to finish because shifts change, specialists get involved, and serious cases escalate to broader teams. Every time a case moves from one person to another, you risk losing context, repeating work, or missing a detail that later turns out to matter. Beginners often assume the hard part is spotting the alert, but in many organizations the harder part is keeping the investigation coherent as multiple people touch it over time. That is where playbooks, case management, and evidence standards come in, because they turn handoffs from casual conversations into reliable transfers of responsibility and knowledge. When those foundations are weak, the SOC becomes dependent on individual memory and heroics, which is fragile and unfair. When those foundations are strong, even brand new analysts can contribute safely because the system guides them toward consistent work. Our goal is to explain why handoffs fail, what good handoffs look like, and how these three elements make handoffs smoother without making the team slow or bureaucratic. A handoff is more than telling someone a ticket exists, because what the next person really needs is a mental model of what is happening and why certain decisions were made. A good handoff includes the current state of the case, what evidence has been collected, what hypotheses have been considered, what actions have been taken, and what the next decision point is. If any of those pieces are missing, the next person must spend time reconstructing the story, and reconstruction under time pressure leads to mistakes. This is why handoffs tend to fail during busy shifts, because people rush and assume the next person can figure it out. Beginners should notice that security operations is a narrative problem as much as it is a technical problem, because you are building an explanation from signals, and narratives are easy to distort when they are passed along informally. A failed handoff can produce duplicated work, inconsistent severity decisions, or gaps in evidence that make later containment or reporting harder. The cost is not just time, because every repeated step delays response, and every missing detail increases uncertainty. When you improve handoffs, you improve both speed and quality, because the team spends less time relearning and more time moving forward. Playbooks are one of the most effective tools for improving handoffs because they define a shared approach to common case types. A playbook is not a rigid script, and it is not a step-by-step set of commands, because in many cases the exact environment and tools differ, but it is a structured guide that says what questions to ask, what evidence to gather, what decisions need to be made, and what escalation criteria apply. For a beginner, playbooks are like a checklist pilots use before a flight. The goal is not to replace skill, but to prevent avoidable mistakes when attention is divided. A well-designed playbook also makes a case easier to hand off because the next person can see which part of the playbook has been completed and which part is still open. That reduces ambiguity and reduces the temptation to start over from scratch. Playbooks also standardize language, so analysts describe the same concepts in similar ways, which matters a lot when teams work across shifts or regions. When a playbook is missing, each analyst invents a personal workflow, and that leads to inconsistent evidence and inconsistent conclusions. The more consistent the approach, the smoother the handoff, because the next person recognizes the pattern of work. Case management is the system that holds the story of the investigation, and it is the backbone that makes playbooks usable in real operations. Even if you do not name a specific platform, case management means having a consistent place to record notes, attach evidence references, track status, assign ownership, and document decisions. Without case management, investigations become scattered across chat messages, email threads, and individual memory, which makes continuity nearly impossible. A good case record answers simple but crucial questions, such as who is currently responsible, what is the current severity, when the case started, and what milestones have been reached. It also provides a timeline, because time matters in security incidents, and understanding the sequence of events is often how you differentiate a benign situation from a coordinated attack. Beginners should recognize that case management is not primarily for compliance or reporting, even though it can help with those. It is for operational clarity. When a shift ends or a specialist is pulled in, the case record becomes the shared truth that prevents confusion. Improving handoffs often starts with making sure case records are complete enough that another analyst can pick up the work quickly and confidently. Evidence standards are the rules that define what counts as sufficient support for a conclusion, and they are the difference between an SOC that is trusted and one that is constantly questioned. Evidence standards specify what types of artifacts should be captured or referenced, how to describe them, and how to tie them to a decision. For a beginner, think of evidence standards like the rules of a science experiment. If you claim something is true, you need to show how you know. In an SOC, that might mean capturing the key event details, summarizing why the activity is suspicious, recording what normal explanation was considered, and noting what additional context was requested from system owners. Evidence standards also reduce the risk of overconfidence because they force analysts to ground conclusions in observable facts rather than intuition. When evidence is recorded consistently, handoffs become smoother because the next person does not have to ask basic questions like what exactly triggered this or what did we confirm so far. Evidence standards also protect the organization during stressful incidents because they create a defensible record of actions and rationale. Without standards, two people can look at the same case and disagree about what happened, which wastes time and damages trust. One way to see the relationship between these three elements is to imagine them as layers that support each other. The playbook defines the approach. The case management system records what happened, and evidence standards ensure that what is recorded is useful and consistent. If you have a playbook but no reliable case management, people may follow the approach but fail to capture it, so handoffs still break. If you have case management but no playbooks, you may capture work, but the work itself may vary widely, so records are inconsistent and difficult to interpret. If you have both but no evidence standards, the record may exist but be low quality, with missing artifacts or vague reasoning. Beginners should take away that handoffs improve when the organization builds a common way of thinking and then preserves that thinking in a consistent record. These are not separate initiatives because they reinforce each other, and the combined effect is much greater than any one element alone. When these layers are aligned, handoffs become routine rather than risky events. That routine is what creates reliability at scale. A practical source of handoff failure is unclear status because people use vague labels that do not actually describe the state of the investigation. If one analyst marks a case as in progress but does not specify whether it is waiting on evidence, waiting on a system owner, or waiting on a decision, the next analyst wastes time discovering the bottleneck. Better case management includes state descriptions that capture why work is paused or what the next action is, even if the label itself is simple. Another failure point is missing decision rationale, where the record shows what was done but not why it was done, which makes it hard for the next person to judge whether the path was correct. Evidence standards help here by requiring a short explanation of reasoning at key points, such as why severity was assigned or why an alert was dismissed. A third failure point is over-reliance on verbal handoffs, where critical details are shared in conversation but never recorded, so they vanish when the conversation ends. Beginners should realize that verbal handoffs can still be useful for urgency, but they are not durable, and operations needs durability. When you design handoffs, you design for the reality that people forget, people get interrupted, and people leave, so the system must carry the memory. Playbooks also improve handoffs by reducing the number of judgment calls that have to be reinvented on each shift, but only if playbooks are written in a way that matches reality. A playbook should include clear decision points, such as what makes an event likely benign, what makes it suspicious, and what makes it urgent enough to escalate. It should also include common pitfalls, like typical false positives and frequent misunderstandings about the alert type, because these are the places where new analysts struggle most. Beginners often think playbooks should cover every possible situation, but that makes them unusable. So the better approach is to cover the most common and most risky scenarios and then allow room for analyst judgment. Playbooks should also reflect escalation paths by clarifying who to involve and when, because a handoff is often a form of escalation, not just shift change. When playbooks are aligned with how the organization actually works, they become a shared map that analysts can follow, and maps are especially valuable when someone new is carrying the case. If playbooks are disconnected from reality, they create frustration, so maintaining them is part of operational maturity. The best playbooks evolve based on real cases and analyst feedback. Case management practices can be improved by treating the case record as a narrative with specific required components rather than as a loose set of notes. A high-quality case record usually includes a summary that can be read quickly, a timeline of key events, a list of collected evidence references, and a section that captures decisions and next steps. Even when cases are not severe, these elements make work easier to review and easier to transfer. Beginners should see that the summary is not a creative writing exercise. It is a compact explanation of what is known and what is unknown. A timeline matters because security investigations often revolve around sequence, such as whether an action happened before or after a login, or whether multiple systems were involved in a short window. Decisions and next steps matter because they prevent cases from stalling, especially during shift changes, by making it clear what is needed to move forward. Good case management also tracks ownership, because an unowned case is a case that will be forgotten. When ownership is explicit, the handoff becomes a clear transfer of responsibility rather than a vague hope that someone will handle it. Strong case management turns an SOC from a collection of individual efforts into a coordinated operation. Evidence standards should also address consistency in terminology and level of detail, because even correct evidence can be unusable if it is described in confusing ways. If one analyst writes detailed notes and another writes minimal notes, the team cannot easily compare cases or learn from them. Evidence standards also help by defining what level of certainty is required before closing a case or escalating it, which reduces argument and rework. For example, an escalation might require a minimum set of observed facts and a clear risk statement, so the receiving team understands why they are being asked to act. Beginners should understand that evidence standards do not mean writing long reports for every case, because that would be impractical, but they do mean capturing the critical facts that support the conclusion. This might include the identity involved, the system involved, the time window, the observed behavior, and any confirming or disconfirming context. Evidence standards also encourage the practice of distinguishing facts from interpretations, because facts are durable while interpretations can change as new information arrives. When evidence is recorded in a structured and consistent way, handoffs become smoother because the next person can quickly tell what is solid and what is uncertain. That is exactly what you want during fast-moving investigations. Another important aspect of improving handoffs is ensuring that playbooks, case management, and evidence standards support learning rather than just compliance. After a case closes, teams often benefit from reviewing what happened, what was confusing, and what could be improved, especially for recurring alert types. Those reviews should feed back into playbooks by updating decision points and false positive guidance, and they should feed back into evidence standards by clarifying what information was missing when decisions were made. Case management records make those reviews possible, because without a reliable record you cannot learn systematically. Beginners should notice that learning is not just about preventing attacks. It is about preventing repeated operational mistakes, such as chasing the same noise week after week. When handoffs improve, learning improves, because the record becomes consistent and comparable across time. This also supports analyst confidence, because analysts can see that their work contributes to improvements rather than disappearing into a void. Confidence grows when people see that the system responds to problems by getting better, not by blaming individuals. In a mature SOC, handoff improvements are part of continuous improvement, not a one-time fix. When you step back, improving SOC handoffs is about making sure that responsibility, context, and evidence transfer cleanly from one person to another, even when the environment is busy and the stakes are high. Playbooks create a shared approach so that investigations follow a consistent path and decision points are clear across shifts and across analysts. Case management preserves the narrative of what happened, what was done, and what is next, so work does not reset with every handoff, and so ownership stays explicit. Evidence standards ensure that decisions are grounded in observable facts and that the case record contains the minimum information needed for someone else to pick up the work quickly and confidently. Together, these elements turn handoffs from risky moments into routine operational steps, which is the foundation of reliable security operations. For a beginner, The most important takeaway is that detection and response are team sports, and team sports require clear plays, a shared playbook, and a reliable record of what happened. When those foundations are in place, analysts spend less time decoding each other's work and more time reducing real risk, which is the true purpose of the SOC.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.